Hey guys! So today you and I are going to talk about communication and collaboration. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, how would you suggest that the software development team improve their communication and collaboration? I would suggest that, well, depending a little bit now on your setup and so forth, I would suggest that you get yourself a instant messaging system of some sort, like Microsoft Teams or Slack or what have you. Anything will do. And then you create a team channel, and then you make a commitment to having every single conversation that you need to have with your coworkers that is not highly private. In other words, something that is literally just it might not even be work related or something like that, but anything related to pull requests, needing help from somebody, or whatever, always have that conversation in that channel. My rule that I use is that use the most public forum possible, within reason, of course, for all conversations. That's the first thing you should do. The reason why this is important is because of the same reason a concept like Twitter or Facebook or so forth actually works whatsoever. And that is that if you want to kill a community online, it doesn't matter which forum you're in, and practically everybody knows it, I argue. All you have to do is to remove the content. If there's nobody posting, nobody's ever replying or having a conversation or a dialogue or anything like that, there's nothing there to read. There's nothing to take an interest in. And in these remote working times, this is especially true for us in software development, because I can tell you right now, the teams that have the lowest level of communication and collaboration that I've ever seen, they all have the same problem. And that is that their team channel is always empty. They're never talking actually to each other. Like, they're not in like a group channel. They're never conversing as a group. They're just doing point-to-point communication for everything. And what very quickly happens in that sort of situation is that everybody talks to maybe one or two people and then ignores the rest of the team, because that's probably one of the few things potentially that having an office space could improve. I don't always argue. I argue that is not always the case because it doesn't always work out. But the principle that I'm going for is that if I say something in a group, even if it's intended for just another individual, what happens is that everybody gets the message, and either they will just ignore it because they can't answer my question or they have no interest in the topic, but they are now handed the option of introducing their own thoughts to the conversation. And that works on two levels usually, in my opinion. One is that it actually means that there's activity now. In other words, people get that face time. It's the same thing you do when you have a lunch together or something like that. You may not all be talking at the same time, but you are building a bond by just interacting or being part of the interaction of two other people. You're part of the group. You get some sensation of these minor social cues, and you build up comfort basically with the people, because you can observe how they are communicating and what interest they have and their thought processes and things like that. And that is the thing that builds bonds between people, which means that now if you go to lunch with people, you're more likely to actually interact with them in a setting outside of, say, lunch. And it's the same thing here, where if you have post something always in a private channel to somebody else, you might build up a relationship with that individual, but you're not building a relationship with the rest of the people in the group. And that's how you usually get to these sort of situations where, at least in my opinion, the teams, they can't collaborate. Like when things are like when they're gonna debug things or they're gonna do A, B, or C or so forth, they can't work together because they haven't even gotten to a stage where they're above stranger level, basically, which is exactly what happens when you don't communicate. You don't have an understanding of how communication works. And I argue that the people who have lone wolf mentality or very, very poor leadership skills or very, very poor understanding of group dynamics, they don't understand this. And so I try to make it a rule in my teams, and it works flawlessly every single time. The only time it or rather, it does work. The problem with it is that the people who don't like to communicate in this fashion will resist you, and that almost always happens. And what I usually tell my managers and things, and people and so forth, is that if this person is valuable in terms of like they work perfectly under normal circumstances and so forth, and there's usually not an issue, then let them just let's not change it. But if they do have a history of poor communication, this is the minimum thing that they can do to improve that. And I've sadly very rarely seen people fix this problem, because as I like to say, like if you if you have the right people, they will adopt the ideas and like gonna get on board and so forth because they see the value. But if you have the wrong people, you can't sell it to them. It doesn't matter how much you try. Like I said not that long ago, they asked me to do exactly this thing with a team of software developers to try to help them communicate better. And I said that I'm not going to be able to do that, because the thing that I can do, the only thing I have power to do, is to invite other people to be part of a conversation and try to ask people for their thoughts or try to make them engage. But if, as you've probably had one or two of those conversations in your life where it's like talking to a wall. Like you try to get them to engage, you try to ask them things, you try to like various things, but they're simply not interested in having a conversation. And you can't force people to do this, which means that if they're not taking to these ideas, then they're probably never going to do it. And so that's why I usually tell my managers that these strategies, they do work. It's the same. The basic concept is the exact same thing as team building and things like that. There are multiple ways you can do this, but the foundation is the same. If you can get people to communicate as a group in general, their communication skills and collaboration will grow. But that doesn't mean that will be enough, because just as there in any group of friends, you have people who are really extroverted. I like to say the heart and soul people. They are the glue that keeps the group together in many cases, where like they're the ones who are inviting people, they're the ones who are engaging with people and so forth. And then you have people who just kind of tag along. If you have a whole team of people who are just there to tag along, you can't fix this problem, because this is not just who they are at work. Usually it is who they are socially. They're not the people who are going to drive, not the people who are going to engage and so forth. So you can't just change that behavior. You can encourage it and you can do all these things that I was talking about, but you cannot force people to be somebody who they're not, basically. So what I want you to take away from this is that the best way I've found to improve team communication and collaboration is to create this basic rule for yourselves, where you say that any conversation that is not strictly private, very intimate, or in some way not, meant to be a public conversation in any way, keep it in a team channel. Always communicate as part of a team, because as I said, that will give you a sensation of how well this group is feeling and how well they are collaborating. I can give you a really easy example to check the waters in your own team. You can do it right now. If you ask a question that is not directly pointed to an individual, how fast, if at all, will someone in your team reply? Do that a few times and see, is there only one or two people who ever reply? Is it completely silent? Is usually somebody from the team replying regardless of what the topic might be and so forth? You get a sensation of that. It's the exact same thing when you go on a forum, you post a question or you post a suggestion or something and nobody replies, or your tweet or whatever. Then you know that topic, or like that you don't have an engaged group of people. And that is it's the best measurement you will have for how well your team is going to collaborate and communicate and things like that. If they don't care enough to reply or to engage with something that another person says in the team chat, or it doesn't have to be a team chat. You can say the same thing. It's a little bit easier in the real life environment because of social, there are social norms to follow. So if you ask a whole group of people, if they're always quiet and nobody ever says anything, well, that tells you something. If somebody tries to engage, that tells you something else. But it's the basic idea is that you try to create a group conversation as much as possible, especially if you're doing like remote work or things like that, and you see how much people are engaging. And then there are exercises you can do. They can follow the basic practices. You can do pair programming. You can like try to work on stories together and so forth and so on, and just see if people warm up to each other. You can do kickoffs, like all these other things. I don't have to cover them because everybody, I hope, knows about those things. But that is, I argue, the best measurement. I use the same trick when I want to figure out if a meeting is dead or not, which is I say something, or I direct a question to an individual or something like that, because I know that if I ask the whole group, usually they will be quiet if it's a group of people who are not so engaged or introverted or things like that. And so, but if I shift to direct communication in a public forum, they will feel forced to reply because I asked them a question directly. And then I'll just measure how quickly does the conversation die. Is the conversation only happening if I force someone into, like I rope them into a conversation with me with a question or something that pointed towards them? Or is it like if once I do that, does the conversation start flourishing and other people join in? If nobody ever joins in, then the conversation is dead, or the team is basically not, like there is very little room for communication and collaboration in this team. And as I said, guys, these things are very easy. You just like it. I argue that it's you can think about in school the class clown, or that's the person I call, that's the social glue. It's the individual who has a driving effect on conversations and mood within the group. You can take that role as a tech. You should usually take that role, if you ask me, at the very least, as a tech lead or someone like that, because it is necessary to have such a person. You don't have to be a clown, but I hope you see what I'm saying. You have to have someone who drives the social interaction in any group. Doesn't matter which one it is. Ideally, you have people who are very easy, and like if you take the first step and they kind of follow, that means that your team is healthy in terms of communication and collaboration. Like there is room here for growth and expansion. If that never happens, then there is nothing you can do. Then they will stick to whatever personality like they have, and it's, as I said, you can basically not change that behavior in an individual. You can take them to resource, you can take them on all of these sorts of things, and hopefully that's going to work. But in my experience, in many cases, it might just be better to either accept that this is as well as they're going to do and live with the consequences of that, or replace them with people if it's really important that this is something that you like take to the next level. Have a great day.